one of the thoughts that I had with us recording our conversations is I think that we can provide a deeper insight than what's already out there for people that are interested in search arbitrage. And I think that there's a lot of people, it seems like there's a lot of people starting out. When we were in Barcelona, the Affiliate World Summit, I was surprised to see how many people have interest in this field. So perhaps we can help a person or two with this project.
Sure.
But how about that we like give a little bit of background on our journey? Would you like to tell, like, how long have you been in this game?
Yeah, in the search arb space, we probably, both of our, you have a bit of a longer journey in starting with the SEM world, but I would say the broader adoption of search arbitrage back in like 2013, 14 was centered around email. And that's when I first came across what search arbitrage was. And at the time, I think everyone was trying to understand what does it mean to send traffic to a feed. And the feeds at the time were also not very also understanding of like how to receive this traffic. So the concept of registering a domain name, verticals, and keyword reporting was all still being put together. And I'd say I was really at the beginning of this like mass adoption and how to monetize properly in a compliant way, putting together the original reporting tools and arbitrageurs putting traffic onto, at the time it was the main sponsor. It quickly grew from there, email arbitrage, but the challenge at the time was like, how do you keep it all compliant with subject lines, with the content inside the email? And that kind of prompted a broader discussion of like compliance. If this was to grow, how do you keep it compliant?
That
Long
was a big
story short,
question, especially with
it
email.
ended up not being controllable. Email arb, Google at the time ended up deciding it was just worth too much. It was too much risk, not worth the trouble. So
Yeah.
the industry as a whole at the time had already started to move into native. The journey with native started at Taboola and Outbrain, where we saw most of the traffic. And that was probably around 2015, 2016. Again, like the feeds haven't really caught up yet. Arbitrage was still like a hush method of monetization with these feeds. And
It was like
like the whole
definitely a gray
compliance
zone.
game reset, understanding this new form of arb. What can we accept with native? But eventually, like with the availability of the tools and the spy tools as well, native became much easier to police, and thus like making the whole search arb game much more stable. So from there it grew. We started buying a lot of native ads to the feeds, understanding within native like all the different sources that you could buy between push, between legitimate news sites, desktop, mobile. All of this kind of reacts differently, and Google values it and prices it differently as well. Within this native world, you had so many subsections of traffic that you had to understand from a monetization side, but also compliance, and eventually trying to figure out what sources Google was most comfortable with over the next couple of years from there. I think native continued to grow significantly. Eventually, other native feeds came in. The field got a lot more competitive. Compliance became stricter, of course, because of all the clickbaity type headlines that people would naturally kind of start pushing. So regulation got tighter, which made it more difficult to buy the traffic at the rates that we would have saw back in 2016 when we first started to like 2019. The CPCs and the CPAs that we would see changed dramatically. Everything got more expensive, and at the same time, the RPCs also were getting lower and lower every year. as more of this traffic started to flood in to certain keywords. Budgets were getting tighter. So it became harder. And I think as we've gone through this journey, we've, we've discovered how with search arbitrage, it's always about the next step. Like, what is the next channel? What else can you be buying? Even if it's within native, what are the different sections of traffic that haven't been congested yet? For us, that's when we started to look into social traffic. Facebook at the time was, I think, still a real Wild West kind of environment where the traffic was really cheap. The compliance in terms of like them accepting what a parked page was also much looser. So we shifted much more into Facebook and started building up the traffic there. And this was around probably 2018, 19. So at the time we were still overlapping with native. And from there, we're still buying social traffic today. Social, as with native, has a lot of different segments, Facebook being just one of them. You have, of course, all the other social networks. TikTok in the last 2 years has been one of the fastest growing ones. But that's the journey to date, covering the biggest portions of traffic and our journey through it. So seeing like where things started to where we're at now, having had a hand in kind of shape the field back in like 2013, it's amazing to see how far we've come and how many people have jumped into the field, like a broader adoption and understanding of what it is.
It could be interesting for listeners to know how we got to know each other. So it's also relevant to the ARB journey that you described, because you had the benefit to start at what was the largest monetization service at the time. So you could see a lot that was going on in the market. And then when my company acquired Domain Sponsor, we then started our journey and together. And so we both had the opportunity to see what's working both for us, but also for other players in the market.
Yeah.
Ahead of this conversation, then I thought, I wanted to ask you, do you remember what was the very first campaign that you launched? What was it? What vertical? Where did you launch it? How did it go?
At the time, when I think the hottest category at the time was health, specifically all these symptom creatives that we used to see, now not as popular anymore, but all the symptom-based health categories is where I started. With Taboola, that was like the hottest thing at the time, specifically see what kind of symptoms equal what kind of health condition. And it was a really nice flow because you were providing the keywords about various conditions that you might have, and the advertisers on the other side were providing. It was a really nice flow, getting the users really the information that they wanted and not blending in keywords that later on what happened is you saw a lot of these treatment keywords, and of course that wasn't very relevant to the initial interest that the user would have, but of course it paid well. But I think that kind of sparked the end of that vertical. But one that was probably the first one that I launched.
My first it was in 2009, and I think we were sending Yahoo to Google, and they had very weird verticals. It was like trips to the Amalfi Coast, and I remember that my copy was like Viva Italia, Viva Amalfi. And some of that worked, and then it was Christmas decoration also, something like grandma's Christmas decoration. We were like all over the place because we didn't have there wasn't like the nice slide tools that are out there today, so you actually had to be creative and start from scratch.
Yeah.
That was the humble beginning. Yahoo to Google, and yeah, took it from there. Incredibly enough, we found a way to make it work. And I remember the feeling the first day that we saw that the ROI is there, and then we were like, should we do it? Should we put $1,000 in it? And we did, and then the next day we were like refreshing the page, like how much money comes back, and then 2,000 came back. And then I was like, this is incredible. We've discovered a money printing machine. This will change our lives. This was the feeling when we saw that update. And it did. I'm still in this game, still doing it.
I think it's always like, in my experience with onboarding campaign managers, media buyers, or talking to others in this space, it's always that original thrill of seeing what the ROI looks like. Like your first winning campaign is such a feeling of like disbelief almost, where you're like, I bought this traffic for $100 and I got $150 in return. That's always what kicks off like a much broader like push into finding more of these. Like,
yeah, I remember shortly after, I love watching UFC and this kind of stuff, and I went to a fight in Stockholm. It was a smaller one, it wasn't UFC, and there was a lot of shady people at this fight, and I was sitting right behind a big group of Bandidos members. And I just thought, oh my God, if they knew what I have something that's so much better than what they're into. You mentioned onboarding media buyers. That was the next thing I wanted to ask you in this conversation. So how big is the team currently?
Of media buyers, we have probably, I would say, 30 active.
If you add everybody up in the organization.
Like everyone in the organization, I would say we're probably at 30 people with a hand in helping us generate the content, the material for the campaign, the logistics of assembling them, as well as the analysis. With a campaign like at scale, it's easy to run, of course, one campaign, but if you want to launch like 500 campaigns a day, it requires a lot of logistics. So it's important that it's not just the media buyers, but there's a strong infrastructure to support them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that's nice that we've come to that stage, because in the beginning when we tried to add new media buyers, I remember thinking I wanted them to do the same thing that I do, like to launch a campaign from beginning till the end with everything that's part of it. Finding creatives, finding what vertical to run, researching competitors, registering the domain, etc. The whole funnel. And of course you can do that, but you'll find much less media buyers out there that are willing and able to pull through the whole thing. So if there's anyone listening to it that is thinking about building a team, I would really I would have wanted to get that advice to try to simplify it for the people that you add to the team.
Yeah. Everyone, like the key to the build out of so many media buyers in our most recent iteration, I think the success is that everyone focuses on their part. And we don't want the media buyers to get bogged down with having to register things, to do uploads, and a lot of the reporting, having to assemble it themselves. Media buyers should just focus on buying and monetizing the traffic of their campaigns. Give them the maximum amount of time to do the analysis that they need, and we'll get better results.
I mean, it sounds simple, but there's a lot of pieces that can slow your momentum as a media buyer, and it takes planning to make sure the process is as smooth as possible. In our conversations, planning this whole thing, we've been coming back to the story of McDonald's, using that because McDonald's has been good at like compartmentalizing, okay, a simpler process making a burger,
Mhm.
but still they manage to compartmentalize and make it very simple so that they can hire very freely because the system is so well defined,
Yeah,
and it's possible to do in a search arb context as well.
absolutely.
So people are probably curious about where do we buy currently? What are our main sources?
Yeah, I mean, we we're buying really everything that we can, and there are some things, of course, that we're spending more in, like with Facebook, with TikTok, and GDN, but we're always testing new things, new networks, exchanges, experimenting constantly, of course, with native, Taboola, Outbrain. Within those, however, it's really the social side that has been quite strong for our ads.
Yeah. If we try to translate it to someone that is starting out or doesn't have that much volume, I would say, yeah, I'm curious to hear what you think, but I would say that it's good to make an assessment of who you are and what your strengths are, because every buy platform has its own specialties, and some are like a bit more, if you're like more analytical, and others maybe give you premium if you're more creative. And so I would say very roughly, native is, there's a lot of details and data to check often. Like that I would say is the success factor. So if you're more analytically minded,
Yeah,
I'd probably point in that direction. And if we go on the other end, like TikTok, for a long time it's been like the beginning of launching, of buying a TikTok, is to have videos and to put together nice videos. So perhaps if that's your strength, then try that first. I don't know, what would you say?
yeah, I would agree. I think different platforms have appeal to different media buyers, and like you said, with native, with GDN, even like you have a lot of analytics based optimizations that you have to put in place either with automations and tools or to have to look constantly at your campaign. It's much harder to scale.
Hang on, my daughter came in, sorry.
No problem.
Where were we? Sorry.
We were talking about different channels, different feeds, different media buyers. Yeah, so native, definitely very analytical, report heavy. You have a lot of things that you're trying to block. Uh, the only way to really scale it is to have the tools and the automations in place. Otherwise, you would be looking at a handful of campaigns all day long, 7 days a week, nonstop, because there are so many sources that are coming in that all perform differently. The creative assembly within native is not as intensive. You have your headline and the image, of course, which require a lot of thinking, but with Facebook, I would say it's the reverse, where the creative is much more of a focus, where whether it's a reels or just a static image, there's a lot more competition with drawing in the user and getting those high CTRs. Editing, like constantly working on your video creative for TikTok as well. What are your hooks, the content that, or the angle that you're using in the video? There's a lot of optimization that you have to put in on the video side, as opposed to the campaign, where if your video performs really well, then you have much less that you would have to optimize with the buy side, because you're really
Yeah.
buying from just Facebook or TikTok. There's not a lot of noise there to filter out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, nicely put. Okay. Hey, maybe we leave it at this point. The plan is to do it once a week, and I think we can just go in. There's a whole chain of what one needs to consider when media buying. We have, for instance, experience about all the different providers where you can sell your traffic, what to keep in mind when you start sending Keywords is a chapter of itself. I think we can
Yeah.
hop into that. How to work with creatives and research. There's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Let's explore those in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Okay, amigo.
All right.
I'll hop
Good
off.
rest of the day.
Speak soon.
Bye.
You too. Ciao.